One. All right. Hello, and welcome back to Crystal Queer QA's podcast. This is our third episode. I'm joined here with my dad, Chris Trudeau, and my name is Andrew Richardson, and we are going to be just taking this video segment to talk about being the parent of a transgender person, also being a person who's transgender who has a cis straight parent as well. So that's sort of what we're going to be diving into. So Dad, Chris, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, like Andrew said, my name's Chris Trudeau. Living in New Hampshire now. Originally, our family was from northern Vermont, Colchester, Burlington, Vermont area. We pretty much raised our entire family up there. In our home, Andrew was one of 5 kids, and we always wanted a big family, and we got a big family, and both my wife and I really love having lots of kids and lots of variety. It is the spice of life. And I'm really happy to be here because, being with Andrew in this journey, with him as well as myself in the past couple of years, there's a lot we've talked about. There's a lot we've shared, even some arguments on occasion, but all good. So I'm really excited to be sitting here chewing the fat about really what life's all about with my son.
All right, wonderful. So I originally started this podcast because I wanted to have these real life conversations with people that kind of broke down the LGBTQIA different subjects. So today we're a little bit late on posting this, but this is our Father's Day episode. So, this specific parenting video is really going to focus on some things that you can ask of yourself as a parent to maybe, if you're at a point to become a better ally for your child or for somebody who who has an LGBTQIA child or adult in their life. So this is going to be that episode. And we wanted to be able to make it easier to hear. So like you were saying, Dad, we've had these conversations in the past, and I really value the way to which we have them, which is, we always bring that respect. We always bring that listening, active listening to the other person. And even when things might get to that argument stage, or we might, feel a little bit heated now and then, I've never felt like I couldn't go back to you to go back to a specific part in the conversation, or, I've never felt negative vibes from you when we talk about this. So I really appreciate that. And I'm really excited to get this started.
Same here, Andrew. I mean, our conversations together have always been, I don't know, really, really fruitful. I love having talks with our kids when they're adults. I mean, it's so good to stay connected and talking about relevant subjects that are part of everyday life.
Mm-hmm. So one thing that I wanted to note about the 5 kids that I'm part of, I have 3 older sisters and a younger sister. So just to give everybody a little bit of an idea, my oldest sister is a lesbian. She's married to her wife, and I am a transgender man. And then my youngest sibling, Ivy, is a transgender woman. So we have quite the spectrum of LGBTQ people in our family within our kids. So that's pretty cool, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll get to the first question that we wrote. So this is coming from a PFLAG resource. This is titled Our Trans Loved Ones. And so it asks quite a few questions, but I chose 3. The first one is, what causes somebody to be transgender? So I'm going to read what they say. And I'm also going to be posting, as I have with the other other videos, going to be posting all of the resource links so that you can go back and view these yourself if you want to. So what they say is that there's no single explanation for why some people are transgender. Transgender people have existed throughout history and across societies the world over. The diversity of transgender expression and experiences argues against any simple explanation. So a Dr. Joanna Olson, a medical director of the Center of Trans Youth Health and Development at Children's Hospital in Los Angeles, says, quote, trying to identify causes, whether they are genetic, hormonal, or something else entirely, those studies are underway. The question is, what contributes to the formation of gender identity? It's really complex. Whatever the cause, there is nothing wrong with your loved one, and supporting them is critical and helps result in a more positive outcome for them. So pretty much cut and dry, there really isn't a cause. So what do you think about that, Dad?
Well, I guess the way I see transgender causes or developments or how it's come about through two of my kids so far have really come from, I guess, I let me just speak to your case instead of Ivy's, because that's what we're talking about. You know, it's one of those things. I mean, obviously I'm older, I'm 60 years old, and you know, it was one of those things where when you eventually discussed with us about your transgender identity, that you were a man and that you just didn't feel that you were, or more than feel, you didn't think of yourself as a woman, but you thought of yourself as a man. And I started to kind of roll back in my head as to, wow, that isn't something that is a complete surprise. That was my initial thought. I wasn't completely surprised through by your identifying as man, because you know, you and I share a lot of common interests, whether it was sporting, senses of humor, you know, just the way we approach life, you know, and I always felt like there was a component of you that was kind of in my nature, I guess, as I would look at myself as a man, and that I felt a connection there with you. Baseball hats, and you know, your clothing, you're wearing what you liked things that I liked, as and that I would have identified as being in the realm of men, I guess. And so that was an early on kind of feeling I had I had gotten. And then of course, as we started to talk, you know, I saw that this was something deeply rooted, deeply seated, fundamental to your being, and it made sense. You know, and so for me, the cause of Andrew, you know, as a person, I would agree. I don't know that what caused it to happen. I can't put at least in my mind, I don't put my finger on anything specific. I have done some reading in the world of transgender identity, transgender living and life and whatnot. And I like biology, and so there's theories out there as to, you know, maybe some biological roots to transgenderism. You know, but I don't think it's a subject that's thoroughly researched. My guess is somebody's going to be looking into it over the years, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think those things are probably happening. I mean, maybe as we speak, or yeah, there has been a from what I know of, not as much research into, because there just hasn't been a lot of people who have been studied. So being able to find a cause, whether it's chromosomal or, you know, I think if anything we could point to, it might be societal, that would just continue to nudge that on. And, you know, I think that maybe it isn't a cause, but it's just a realization of the incorrectness of something.
I mean,
Yeah.
isn't, because we've talked before, and I don't want to step on like some intellectual toes, but I know that you and I have discussed the whole dysphoric aspect
Oh,
of
many
gender,
times.
you know,
Yeah.
and just not feeling right. I mean, you know, I know I was born a young girl, but as I grew up, I just didn't feel like a young girl. I was feeling like a young man, you know. You
Mm,
know, that you expressed, you know, years ago. And
right.
so to me, therein lies a deeply psychological component, I would think.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely hard to pinpoint. But I'm really I'm excited and interested to see how the research and the biological results start to come in, and if there is a cause, or maybe there just isn't, and it's something that we really don't, or maybe might not ever know about.
Mhm.
But I thought it was a good question to include,
Oh yeah.
just because, you know, maybe that's sort of the first thing that pops into folks' heads, whether they have an adult child who comes out as transgender, or they're dealing with a very young child who's, you know, around the age of 5, and they're like, okay, well, now I have this and I'm not really sure how to support my child because I don't know where this is coming from. And that, for some people, I think is what they really look for in the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say it was a question that as a parent you definitely think about,
Mm,
because there is that wonderment as to, wow, you know, born one way, kind of develops another way, and you're like, what's happened, you know? I have to say that with you, it wasn't like what went wrong, you know, it was what happened, you know, where was it? It was a curiosity for me that I wanted to understand where you, how this all developed in you, because it I thought it would help our relationship. It would help me understand you and the greater trans community, queer community all over. You
mm,
know, this is something that was valuable to me.
mm. Yeah, you're such a very thoughtful and curious person. So that, you know, just thinking about what I know about you, that really lines up. And you're always very curious. And I do get that from you. So
Yeah. It's
so
the
yeah.
engineer, you know, you can't help it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I know you're a psychologist or a in psychology, but
Yeah.
engineering pops out everywhere.
For sure. Absolutely. All right. So now that we've sort of focused a little bit on that, the next question that was in this PFLAG document that I really, really liked was, what is the difference between being transgender and the term transsexual? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to read what they have said. It's about a couple paragraphs, so bear with me. Transsexual, used lightly in air quotes, is a less frequently used and sometimes misunderstood term. Considered by some people to be outdated or possibly offensive. I find it a little bit offensive, but that's just me. And others to be uniquely applicable for them, which this term refers to people who are transgender who use or consider using medical interventions such as hormone therapy or surgery, or a combination of the two, to pursue medical interventions as part of the process of expressing their gender. There are also people who identify as transgender who seek medical intervention. So does that sort of make sense a little bit? Like
Yeah.
transsexual means that it can mean that you go through getting top surgery, going on hormones, hysterectomy, vaginoplasty, which is bottom surgery for trans men, you know, a breast increase or reduction, or you know, facial reconstruction, hip reconstruction. All of those things are medical uh, interventions that trans folks can take to be able to. They can also use transsexual as a descriptive word for themselves, but that doesn't mean that people who identify as transgender don't seek medical intervention. They do, but they just maybe prefer to use the word transgender instead. So the word transgender and transsexual do have one thing in common. They are both adjectives, not nouns or verbs. So just as you wouldn't say that someone has been gayed or straightened, neither would you say that someone has become transgendered. So for example, saying Alice is a person who is transgender is correct, just like saying Alice is a person who is young. But saying Alice is a transgender or Alice is transgendered is not. So in fact, saying either of those terms is considered offensive. So avoid using the words in those ways. So kind of like with they, them pronouns,
Yeah.
it can be tricky to work those into your rhetoric and into your everyday conversations with people. But every single time you work on it and you try to take a second and make the distinction between transsexual and transgender, this sort of a conversation can help that. So
Right.
your thoughts, feelings?
Yeah, that's a lot to unpack. There's like three pieces in there. So let me first talk about like the transsexual component. So when I was younger, teens, 20s, there were people I knew who were, of course, gay, lesbian, but there were those, I knew a few, not a lot. I knew a few people who were transgender um, at the time. But the term transsexual, I in your definition you read it, it said it's a dated term, and I can totally see that, because even using it now, after obviously talking with you and other people, that I are friends with who are transgender, that it's just, it's not really telling the story, if you ask me, or it's not the best descriptor in the world. Now, I do have opinions about that because, again, like we've talked about before, to me, sexual or sexuality, I throw that in the biology, the strictly scientific definition of sexuality. I throw it in the biological bin, and I throw the gender in also, I mean, I guess I don't throw it in the biological bin. I throw it more in the psychology, identity, wholeness bin of a human being, because it's like, I think of it's really the person. The biology is obviously part of the person. Anyway, I don't want to get too
Right.
weirded out with that, but anyway, so I think transsexual is like a misnomer, or sexually moving from male to female, or excuse me, whatever, that there's a defined biological thing going on there. So it doesn't describe, whereas gender, I mean, male, female, but other genders, non-binary, all the different gender identities makes more sense, because in my mind, and understanding myself, I mean, I'm cisgender, so I think of myself as a man, but I'm also male, sexuality biologically. So so that's where I think that the transsexual, in my usage, I just don't think of it that way. I do definitely think of in the transgender world. I think of you as a man, as you identify, and I see you in that regard, regardless, top surgery, anything physical, that's the choice of the individual person, but I do understand the identity portion of it. And that to me is the biggest component. I would think it is, to me, being a man. I mean, I have parts that are sexual, that are man, but I feel more of my identity as a man is not wrapped around in my parts. It's who I am. It's the essence, so to speak. So the last thing that you mentioned was, and this is the part that's interesting, is the fact that transgendered, meaning like you were once one gender and then you moved to another gender. You were born biological female, but your gender might have moved from female to male. That's the part I don't really understand or know, because I mean, you've described stuff to me. Is that, do you think that is something that all people do see themselves once as one gender and do then really find their true gender, their true identity? I don't know.
I don't know either. And that's a really good question. I don't want to speak for for everyone, as
Right.
as a way to, be respectful and stuff. But for myself, there is still a part of me that identifies with the person who I was before I started to medically transition, before I had a realization, before the gate or the something in my brain preferred to use he him pronouns and preferred to even start thinking about a different name other than mine. And that took me a minute to be able to get used to that change. But I do, on a probably, I'd say daily, maybe weekly basis, think about the person who I was as a youth. I think about that story that I always tell you about going to the beach on the 4th of July and taking my shirt off and just going into the and being stopped saying, you can't, like, I think about that. And so knowing that that was my identity at one point, at times it was not the greatest thing to think about. At other times I really did like it, because it proved to me that I've made progress, that I have, I have agency over my body, that I'm finding my comfort. And so, like,
and as a parent, I mean,
yeah.
that I do remember that scene. And as a parent, that's an interesting change for me, is to see the young child I once knew as a young girl, really, and now I see as a man, is that, there is a transition that occurred for you, but I saw it externally as a relationship. And so I do definitely have feelings and recall things about you as a young person that, in hindsight, yeah, I see a lot of who you are now then, but then I saw you as who you were, and clearly you're the same person. It's just you have come to, like, I guess, a maturity. You've matured even as a person in your gender.
And I think that's why, because even in this conversation, we're talking more about gender and not sexuality.
Yeah.
Like, there is, like, I feel like the sexuality is the underlying, like, we know what you're born with, we know what parts you have, we know what you're supposed to be. But for people who have this as part of themselves, the conversation just sort of focuses more around gender nowadays.
Yeah.
And because people are, one, more educated, and two, just like willing to put the effort in to change the rhetoric.
And I think that's a hard part for a parent, especially a parent of my generation, is just to really start to think about gender being different than sexuality. I mean, I've explained it, in explaining my family, I've explained it to lots of people, and they eventually get it. They eventually say, oh, all right, just because you have a male part doesn't mean that you identify as a male. You can identify as a female, because gender is not sexuality.
Preach. That's good. All right. So do you have anything else that you'd like to add for that question? Or nope. All right, I'm going to move on to the next one then. So our third and final question from this document is, how can I make my home respectful, safe, and welcoming to people who are transgender or gender expansive? I think this is a really good question, because not only does it give us the opportunity to talk about what we've done in our own family with maybe our nuclear family and our extended family, but also what can everyone do? It gives us a good jumping off point. So I'm going to read this little blurb here again too, and then we'll go into our thoughts and opinions. So your loved one will be most comfortable around you if they know that you love them unconditionally and support them as they travel their gender journey. You can help ease their possible feelings of vulnerability by creating a respectful space at home where your loved one can explore and define their gender identity and expression without fear of rejection. For your home to be a respectful and welcoming space, it is important to learn the appropriate terminology, show respect for your loved one's new name or pronoun choices, and have a basic understanding of transgender and gender diversity. Reading this publication is a great first step. So for those of you who are listening, this is a really great place to find more information. Additionally, you might consider which photographs, plaques, or trophies or photo albums you have on display. You can either take action or have a conversation with your loved one in advance. So meaning like if you've got a picture of them when they played female sports versus male sports, or when they played male sports versus female sports, maybe having a conversation with them and saying, hey, do you feel comfortable about this being up here and displayed, or should I switch it out with something else? For my partner, when he came out as trans, after he went through his first few years of hormone replacement therapy, he and his mom had that same conversation, and he elected to have some new photos taken of him. And those photos were used in their house now instead of anything else that was pre-transition stuff. But his mom and him did come to an understanding where some of his like super young youthful photos are still in their photo album. So they don't have to be on display all the time, and you don't have to get rid of those pictures that you hold near and dear to your heart. But having a conversation with somebody can be pretty helpful. Also, engaging in dialogues with your peers about these issues in a positive, supportive manner and using affirming language conveys your unconditional love and support to those that you speak with, but particularly to your loved one. This is where it's really important to use the correct name and pronouns, even if the person is not around. Further, others will take your lead as they interact with your loved one. Positive language is critical when discussing this topic with others. Without it, you may find yourself struggling to demonstrate support. Mindful and authentic intent is important too. Communicate your feelings with sincerity and honesty, and be sure that to the best of your ability, your nonverbal cues align with your words. After all, you can say that you love and support someone, but if your body language and tone belie your words, this can lead to miscommunication, hurt feelings, and a less than supportive environment. Learning to advocate for your loved one is certainly a process and may take some time. Ultimately, it helps to ensure that your loved one has an environment in which they feel respected, safe, and welcome, and in which they can live, grow, and learn. It may take you a while to feel able to support your loved one. You may fear what others will think or say about you, your parenting, or your family, or you simply may not know how to respond. After all, there were no mentions of this as you prepared to become a parent. Reading this publication will help you figure it out and reinforce your courage to move through your feelings, both the good and perhaps the bad, empowering you to discover a renewed commitment to fully celebrate and support your loved one. Over time, you may discover that the source of most of your anxiety derives from your own fears and expectations that may well change as you seek to celebrate your loved one's authentic sense of self. Sorry, that was a lot. But yeah, I mean, those are very simple things that you don't have to like those are things that you think about and can do just within your own body, except for maybe with the exception of like taking down photos and stuff like that. But those are all things that you can do as a person. So are any of those ones that stood out to you, or any of them that you don't feel like would have a big impact, or that you feel any other ones that weren't mentioned that you were like, hey, that might be a good thing to do to help support your loved one?
Yeah, I think it was all a bunch of crap. I'm just kidding. No, I do. There was a lot of good things said there. As you were reading that, and as I was thinking about kind of my journey as a parent, I think the very first thing that any parents, children, brothers, sisters with a family member who does come and talk and present to their family, their decisions, their changes, their whatever that they're going through. If you have no idea and it kind of surprises you, I I find that in those situations, just being as patient as possible, listening, caring, loving. I mean, these are people you love. If you can't act in a loving way, then, you know, take time, go off somewhere. I don't know, do something that gets your head in a better space.
Mm.
But even prior, or even taking some time, I had to take time as an individual to really think through and to allow myself that ability to think about what our family went through, you know, with you coming to us and just and telling us about your identity
Mm.
and who you were and all that. I had to take time to think about it. And I think in doing that, it allowed me to really put a lot of things into perspective, to really not react quickly. You know, I thought through stuff and I reflected and I had to, you know, think about things. And after my own, you know, time to process, then engaging with my wife, my kids, my you know, anybody within my family, I felt like I was in the right mindset.
Mm.
And that, you know, that there was really, I really didn't have any like issues of anger, sadness, or deep sadness. I mean, you know, that it was something that I understood and it made sense. And I wanted to talk to you about it and I wanted to
Mm.
understand all there was, you know. So I guess bottom line in the home, it must be a place of love. I mean, if a family isn't a place of love, then it's a place of dysfunction. And
Mm.
you have to have, you know, you have to have love, you have to have understanding, you have to have compassion, you have to, you know, you have to be caring and loving towards your family members, you know, you know, people in your family.
Mm.
Um, it, that that's the minimum, you know, that's the minimum. That's what's necessary.
Mm.
Uh, as far as like getting used to using pronouns and names, and I mean, you know, it's a transition time. It's not easy. You
Takes a
know, you
minute.
make mistakes.
Yeah.
All I do is I just say, "Oh, sorry, I'm trying. Oops, sorry," and then it does actually become easier in a short amount of time.
Hmm.
It's not as difficult as you may think. Um, you know, for me, I guess I will say that as a person of faith, um, I find that, you know, my faith teaches me to love unconditionally. It teaches me uh, to live my life as a witness of love and compassion and understanding and true generosity, whatever. So it would be difficult and and um trying if I didn't have uh that to kind of lean into
Mm.
when it came to when it comes to just living my life regardless of trans issues. It's just living together and living as a family. When things come up that might be difficult to get through, you get through them because, you know, down deep you have a foundation that's based on um really being considerate, caring, and loving, you know? So
Mm. Yeah.
that's been really helpful to me. And you know, in our case, I mean, you guys were all adults, so you
That
know,
did make it
these,
easier.
yeah, this is something that, you know, I know you guys all thought about, and I considered a lot of that when, you know, when we had to think through how to how to make the adjustment. It was more on me, you know, it was more me
Mm.
just being able to be relaxed, be not to worry. I'm a worrier, so try not to worry, and just, accepting and considerate.
Mm.
And I felt like you guys already had your poop together, so to speak.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I think, like coming from the other end of that, just to give everybody who's listening a little bit of background on my coming out story. I did it on January 1st through an email to my mom, dad, and all of my siblings. Um, that was because it was around the holiday season and we were not in geographical locations that were close to each other, and having a bigger family, it was really hard to make sure that everybody heard it at the same time. So I came out in an email, and I got a one negative response, and that was from mom, and that was the one only real thing that was hard at first. But I will say that it's very important, being the person who's doing the coming out, who's giving the information to the family members, that like you've got to be prepared to have some patience too. Just as important as it is for your parent to have patience with you, the same goes both ways. Like we talk about love and kindness and reciprocity, and like those things need to come from everybody. So if you're a trans person and you're having a hard time with your parents or with whoever you're living with not getting your name and pronouns right, like give it some time, because like you were saying, Dad, it really takes a minute to get everything set and refigured out in your own brain. And then one thing I wanted to sort of touch on too is the foundation that you were talking about of giving yourself time. Do you feel like you had to give yourself time as a human being apart from being a parent, and then go back to that and sort of think about, like, I've been given this information, this is how I feel about it as a person and my belief system, and this is how I feel about it as looking through the glass of a parent. And like
Huh.
doing the individual part first, hashing out your feelings on what it means to be trans, or, a part of the LGBTQIA community. And then looking at it through the lens of who you are as a parent and how you're going to respond. And it's really hard for people to take that time. I think it's just sometimes like a quick little
Right.
judgment.
Yeah, I think it was kind of different with you because, first of all, I did take my own time. Yeah, I took time as a person, as Chris Trudeau, to really wrap my head around what you had said, and of course, I have my own thoughts about things, and I just wanted to make sure that that I had all sorted it out. But going to you as a parent, swinging that into my parenting mindset or parenting role, it was pretty minimal because, to be honest, Andrew, it's like you're an adult, you're my friend, you're it's transitioning from being my kid responsibility to my friend, and not responsibility, so to speak.
Mm,
And so I see you more honestly as a younger peer than as a an older child, in a
mm.
parenting role.
Huh.
I mean, I still feel like you better damn well do as I say. No, I'm just kidding. No, I definitely feel like if you come to me kind of in a role where you're like, hey, you've got wisdom or whatever, and you want to hear what I'm saying, of course I'll offer that up in kind of a parental way.
Mm.
But I also didn't really see it as much like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point. All right, so moving away from the PFLAG document, I had found a pretty good Psychology Today article. It's entitled "Advice from the Parent of a Transgender Person Who's Enjoying the Journey." This is pretty similar to my journey, with the exception of a few negative roadblocks here and there. Um, I've haven't had a significant amount of gender dysphoria. I've had a relatively okay time of getting my insurance all set up, of getting my top surgery, of getting, what I wanted to through the healthcare system. But that's not always the same for everybody. So I thought that it was really might be refreshing to hear of a story that is optimistic and happy, and with the reaction of everybody has been a positive one. So Jo Vester was the mother of a 30-year-old transgender man. Her son was named Jeremy, and it says her son Jeremy's journey of self-discovery never took him in the unfortunate direction of trying to commit suicide. But Jo tells us that her family's experience offers advice based on what she learned, which was when he was born, they had a tom girl child, very similar to how I was when I was young. He wore his hair short. He liked it when people assumed he was a boy. And so Jo always said, tomboy, like that makes sense. Like he'll have, or at that point, the child might grow out of it. Not wanting to perpetuate gender stereotypes, was just happy. Mom was just happy to have child pursuing things. So he pursued football. He was athletic. She cheered at every touchdown that he scored. And so she was attributing this, that perhaps with her acceptance, that's why he didn't struggle as much with gender dysphoria until he hit puberty and natural things started to happen. So, that was the core of what was the negative part. He didn't really like to talk about it. He would always hope that when he was sleeping, he would be transformed into feeling okay. It never says here that he wanted to be a man or a boy, but just wanted to feel okay. He was looking online. He was doing some educating, and then he didn't want to make waves. He didn't want to ruin the positive parts of his family, and he didn't want to be a disappointment. For me, before I hit that send letter on my email to you all when I came out, I was pretty nervous I was going to disappoint you all. So she wrote a book about this, and he asked family and friends to use masculine name and pronouns, and even though they didn't really understand what was going on, they were supportive, both mom and dad. Mom says that her biggest regret was that they were completely uninformed about what it means to be transgender, and they didn't offer the kind of support that Jeremy needed and deserved. So looking back, she wishes she could have given him the boyhood that she denied him, which I think is interesting because, everything's easier in hindsight, but you do the best that you can as a parent, and you try the best that you can to support your kid. So the book that she wrote is called Once a Girl, Always a Boy. And it shows the journey taken by the entire family, which I think is a really good resource. Some sections are written by Jeremy. Some sections are written by both of his parents, and his siblings also had a hand in writing this book. She writes frankly about the things that she would have done differently had she known then what she knows now about raising and supporting a transgender child. But now Jo and her husband, John, meet with parents who have recently learned their child is transgender, and they help them find a way. So if you would like to look up this resource, and if you would like to look into these individual people as resources for yourself too, some live real world resources, feel free to check them out and find them on social media. And I'm sure they could be able to give you, some helpful support. So in this article, they put down some of the key pieces that they as parents would give to other parents as ways to be supportive. So I'm just going to read the bulleted lists, and then we can go back through and talk about specific ones. So number 1, words of advice. There's no one right way to be transgender. Nobody's journey is going to be the same. So keep that in mind. Listening with an open mind and heart. Sort of like you were saying, Dad, like love and openness. Your family member hopefully best, and you would know what are good things that support them. What are their good coping skills? And how can you help support those? Use whatever name and pronoun is requested, even if it's something, if your child is changing their name and you feel a little hurt because that was the name that you gave them, maybe that warrants another question to yourself. but using whatever name and pronoun that they request is the best way to show them that you're supportive. Educate yourself. Watch videos like this one. There are a plethora of books out there for parents and for transgender children and adults. Explore the internet. And the thing that's awesome is that more resources are coming every day, and they can be really, really helpful. This ties into what we were just talking about before. Accept your own feelings. It's okay to feel a sense of loss. It's okay. You may feel angry or overwhelmed. You may wonder why, like, what did I do wrong? Did I do anything to cause this? And know that people are going to react differently, and they're going to react on their own schedules. But it's important at the end of the day just to support your child or your adult child. This one is this is at your own pace. So becoming an ally of the LGBTQ plus community. I know that we have had conversations in the past where I've asked you, hey, Dad, would you ever consider going to a pride? And I always try my best to respect your answer. And up until, I think currently it's a no, which is okay. So, just keep in mind that there may be different levels of involvement that people feel like doing. Some people don't want to be involved at all. Other people are like, hey, I'm going to go to Pride with you, or I'm going to, like, what can I do? And that's fine. Both are fine. But, keeping that in mind can be good. Last two, express support strongly and frequently. Transgender children are among the most bullied in our schools. Transgender adults are often the target of hatred and violence. This is a difficult path, and no person takes it on lightly. They do so because it's who they are. Expressing your love and support can go a long way towards making things easier. So while your child, that might be something that you're nervous about, like, okay, so my child came out as transgender, they're going to have such a hard life now. But being that strong, frequent support that's there for them is going to really help them in their lives and how they view things. And then lastly, be joyful for them and for yourself. This journey, although it's hard in so many ways, is also a joyful one. Transitioning to one's true self is the most affirming thing a person can do. So let yourself be joyful for them, and let yourself find joy that your loved one has discovered who they truly are. Whether you agree with it or not, it's really cool to see somebody figure out something about themselves and be happy about it. Mm-hmm. So any of those stand out to you that you want to go back and sort of expand on?
No, I think they're all good. They were all very well said and good. Yeah, and I think that as different people are all over this planet, don't feel like you have to have it all together immediately. This takes time. It's a process. I mean, I know as a parent, this is a process as much as it is for a person who has come out and has to deal with all the repercussions if they're negative, which hopefully not many of, hopefully more positive stuff. But it is a period that be patient with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But still try.
Yeah.
Every day,
just wake up and try. Just
bounce out of bed and say, I'm going to make this better for someone.
Yeah. So those are just some words of advice. And so, I think that's a good place to wrap up. So, just to reiterate, by no means are we experts on this subject. Like, we're just two people who, wanted to come together and talk about this with you all for Father's Day. We're speaking from our research and from resources that we've used to help articulate things as accurately as possible. If you have any questions or comments about this podcast, please email me. You can reach me at crystalqueerqa@gmail.com. I am always checking that email. I will respond as quickly as I can. So, feel free to reach out if you have any questions for follow-up. Again, we're not experts. We're not trained historians. We're not mental health professionals. Dad's an engineer and I'm a social worker. So we're
You're
doing
more of a professional in this arena than I am.
yeah, fair. I do have some lived experience, you know.
Yeah. Same here.
Yeah. So we're doing this project to try to show that we have the utmost respect for where everybody is at in the learning process. And we expect the viewers to be respectful in return. If you're not, your comments will be deleted and you will be blocked. Thank you so much for being here, Dad. I'm so grateful that you were able to take the time. For everybody listening, my dad is an avid motorcycle racer, MotoGP every year, and he is also getting out there on the track in New Hampshire. So he had a racing weekend this weekend, so that's why this is a little bit a day late.
Right.
So
Spending Father's Day in a different way this year.
yes.
Andrew, the same thing. I'm super proud of you. I'm so glad you put this together. I'm really happy to be a part of it. Again, it's just life, and we have to love each other and live it together. And I am really happy that you yourself are happy, and that we're working together in this type of a project. I look forward to doing more of this, and it'll be a blast.
Yeah, we've talked about doing one ourselves. So, if it's not with Crystal Queer, maybe we can get that all to you listeners. And if you want, leave a comment on that as well. Like if you want Chris and I to go ahead and maybe do an offshoot podcast or something like that, something we've always talked about. I would love to.
That'd be a blast. I mean, I do already have the Joe Rogan look, so
that's good.
Yeah.
All right. Again, I'm Andrew Richardson, founder of Crystal Queer QA, and I truly appreciate you all taking the time and effort to listen with us today and to show your support of the LGBTQIA community, whatever that looks like. Thank you all again, and have a great afternoon and evening.
Peace.